Hey girl gang, it's Dr. Joy here and you are watching Delivering Joy MDTV. Welcome to Well Woman Wednesdays. Come on in my office, girl. Let's talk a little bit about birth control. So you know I'm doing this series on birth control and I'm going to be working from the most effective or permanent birth controls down to the least effective. And today I'm going to be telling you all about tubal ligation. Make sure you keep watching to get the details. All right, ladies, let's jump into this video. So I'm going to be talking to you today about tubal ligation, which is a permanent form of birth control, and it can be one of the most effective methods. So when women have finished their childbearing, a lot of times they might opt for this tubal ligation as a permanent way of making sure they don't have any more pregnancies. But I want to really discuss with you how this procedure works, the different types, the most common types of tubal ligation that are performed, and some of the pros and cons to having tubal ligation done. So in order for us to really wrap our minds around how this works, let's review fertilization. If you've been following my channel, then you already know that that fertilization occurs in the fallopian tubes. So catch this video here in the cards if you haven't seen that on periods and pregnancy, because it has a wealth of information that will really help you understand. But just for the brief recap, we're going to talk about how fertilization occurs real quick. So the ovary is full of immature eggs, right? And each month, one of those immature eggs gets tapped to become a mature egg. And so this egg matures inside of a cyst, and then that cyst ruptures and the egg is released, and it's kind of sucked up by the fallopian tubes like a straw. Got it? Good. So once the egg has been sucked up into the fallopian tube, there are these little tiny hairs that help to kind of brush the egg into the fallopian tube, and that is where the egg is fertilized by the sperm. So the sperm is coming from the vagina through the cervix up into the uterus and then out into the tube, and the egg is in the tube awaiting the sperm. So once the sperm meets the egg becomes fertilized, and that is a new embryo or a new pregnancy. And that embryo or pregnancy is going to then travel the rest of the tube and land inside the uterus on that soft, cushiony lining that the uterus has been building while the egg was maturing in the ovary. Okay, so definitely check out my other video if you want more information on that. But this is how tubal ligation works. So as you can imagine, the fallopian tube is the highway on which the egg and the sperm meet. So with tubal sterilization or tubal ligation, basically the highway is disrupted in some way. And there are several ways that we could do that. I'll start with the most effective way because it's what I do, and that is what's called a bilateral salpingectomy. Bilateral salpingectomy basically means both tubes on both sides are removed. And this is a somewhat newer procedure because we found in recent years that about 80% of ovarian cancers actually start in the tube and not on the ovary. And so we found that women who had had their tubes tied or even removed had a protection from ovarian cancer. So about maybe 5 years ago or so, I started just removing the entire tube. And what I do is I put a camera in right around the belly button while, of course, you're asleep. And then I put 2 tiny incisions through which I can put a grasper where I can elevate the tube. And then I use an electric scissor or an electric current to actually cauterize off all of the blood vessels attached to that tube and then remove it, and it comes out through one of the little tiny ports that I put in. So that is the way that I do tubal ligations now. There have been a lot of studies that show that this actually can be protective against ovarian cancer, and The other thing that it protects against is tubal pregnancy. So we're going to look at some of the other forms of tubal ligation now, and you can see how when the tube is damaged, it may be difficult for a fertilized pregnancy to completely travel through the tube into the uterus. And so one of the risks or the cons of tubal ligation can be tubal pregnancy or ectopic pregnancy, which we know can be life-threatening if the tube were to rupture and the woman is bleeding internally. So the first one of the other alternative methods that I want to look at is the Pomeroy. The Pomeroy basically consists of us taking a loop of the tube and tying a tight knot around it and then clipping that loop off. So the tube is ligated or tied off and then clipped. Similarly, the Parkland method is where we actually cauterize the little blood vessels and tissue right below the tube. It's called the mesosalpinx, and we cauterize that area and then we tie off a large section of each end of the fallopian tube and we clip it. So you've got two areas that are actually tied off. So a little bit more effective than the Pomeroy in terms of its overall effectiveness. You could have a partial salpingectomy, which is a partial removal of the tubes. And the most common type of partial salpingectomy is actually by removing these little fimbria, these little finger-like ends of the tubes, and that can serve as a type of tubal ligation because this is the area that actually brings the egg into the tube so that it is present to meet the sperm. Also have what's called cauterized tubes, and that's where we take an electric current and actually burn about a 2 to 3 centimeter segment of the tube, and then you may also go back and clip the area that has been burned if you so choose as the surgeon. There are also clips and rings that can be applied to the tube to tighten off the opening to the tube. And these are Hoka clamps, Filshie clips, fallope rings. There are lots of different things on the market that you can use to do that. Clips or rings might be popular with some surgeons who worry about a woman potentially wanting a tubal reversal. These are the easiest type of tubal ligation to reverse. However, as I will say several times in this video, if you are not absolutely sure that you are done having your babies, do not opt for a tubal ligation. It is not meant to be reversed, but there are some folks who will attempt to reverse them. More obscure methods of tubal ligation are things like the Eshore procedure, the Adiana procedure, and these were where there were actual implants that were placed at the base of the tube, and these are both procedures that were done vaginally, where we actually went in through the vagina, up through the cervix, and used a camera to find the openings of the tubes or the ostia of the tubes, and then we placed a blocking mechanism there. With the Eshore, it was coils. With the Adiana, it was a little implant. These have since been taken off the market. There have been some horrible side effects with them. I've taken several out for patients and actually removed their tubes. And so this is certainly something that's kind of still unfolding, but we have found that there were lots of complications with these. So these are no longer available on the market in the United States. So now that we've talked about the different types of tubals, let's talk about the general common side effects. So certainly you can experience some changes in your period. I will see a lot of folks who will say that their periods got a lot heavier. Some people say their periods got more painful. Some people will say their periods got lighter. So changes in your menstrual cycle can certainly be an effect. Hormonal changes, that's kind of questionable. Those have not been proven in studies, but I have had patients who, just say, man, I'm experiencing problems with my sex drive. I'm experiencing mood swings. I'm experiencing hot flashes. Sort of menopausal-like symptoms have been reported. But when we looked at large numbers of women who had tubal ligation, we were not able to substantiate that having your tubes tied or removed causes hormonal changes. Pelvic pain and pelvic congestion syndrome. This is a big one. I'd say probably about a third of women who have a tubal ligation or a removal of their tubes may experience what's called pelvic congestion. And that is just basically where the blood flow in the pelvis really kind of backs up. And oftentimes that backs up into the big vessels in the pelvis. And women may feel a sensation of heaviness or pain. They may have pain with intercourse periodically. early, or they may just kind of have this sensation that everything's about to drop out through their vagina. And so pelvic congestion syndrome can be really annoying and can be difficult to treat. So one thing that we do know is that women who experience pelvic congestion syndrome or who have post-tubal ligation syndrome, like with abnormal bleeding and pelvic pain, are more likely to undergo hysterectomy at some point in their life. Tubal pregnancy can be a major side effect of a tubal ligation, especially when we are using the clips, rings, cautery where we're burning the tube, and if we're doing any sort of ligation where we're actually tying the tube off. This happens when a sneaky little sperm actually gets through to an egg that is in a portion of the tube where the egg can actually get through. So let's say we didn't burn the whole tube, or we didn't really tie it off really well, then the egg and the sperm may still find a way to have a rendezvous, and you might have a fertilized egg. That fertilized egg or embryo quickly starts dividing cells. So if you have one cell, it becomes two, and two become four. So you can see how this embryo is growing in size on a daily basis, and it may be that it's too large to actually travel through the narrowed portion of the tube where the clip is, or where the tube has been burnt, or the tube has been tied. And this results in a tubal pregnancy. And a tubal pregnancy can be life-threatening if that tube ruptures and just bleeds freely into the woman's pelvic area and abdomen. So very important, even if you've had your tubes tied, that you pay attention. If you haven't had a period, or if you're experiencing early pregnancy symptoms like nausea and vomiting, increased fatigue, this is something that you want to pay attention to, and you want to get a pregnancy test and make sure that you're not pregnant, because it can occur, and tubal pregnancy needs to be ruled out right away. So if I had had a tubal ligation and I got a positive pregnancy test at home, I would be headed straight to the ER to make sure that I was not pregnant in my tubes. And the way that we check that is via ultrasound, vaginal ultrasound specifically. So the number one side effect of tubal ligation or removal of tubes is actually regret, y'all. Regret is the number one side effect, especially for women who are under 30 years of age. And so this is something that we want to be very intentional about. It is meant to be a permanent procedure. It's not meant to be reversed. And the most heartbreaking conversation that I have in my office is with people who have made a permanent decision and they weren't really sure. So I just highly recommend that you don't make permanent decisions about things that you're not absolutely sure about. In fact, you might be sure at the time when you're 25 and you may have 1 or 2 or 3 kids or even more. So let's say at 30, you meet the person of your dreams that you want to spend the rest of your life with, and then you decide that you want to have a family together, or you want to expand your family, or you're just sad that your kids are all growing up and you don't have any more babies. So there can be lots of reasons why women change their mind after having a tubal ligation. But remember, this procedure is meant to be permanent. And so while there are surgeons out there that will attempt to see if they can salvage the tube, or put it back together, or cut away the damaged part and then sew 2 fresh ends of the tubes together. There's lots of different procedures that are out there, but the thing that you have to realize is that these are not 100%. As a matter of fact, for some women, depending on the type of tubal ligation you had, there are very low chances that you're going to be able to get pregnant normally again, even after having tubal surgery. Because of this fact, and because of the fact that it's sometimes difficult to know exactly what was done during your tubal ligation, if, for instance, I wasn't your surgeon, I don't know exactly what went on in that operating room. So what I generally recommend is in vitro fertilization. If you've had your tubes tied and then you decide that you want to expand your family for whatever reason, I highly recommend seeking advice prior to buying anything, because tubal surgery is not usually covered by insurance. So whatever you do, you're going to spend quite a bit of money, probably tens of thousands of dollars. So I would highly recommend seeking a consultation with a reproductive endocrinologist and an infertility specialist, or what we refer to is an REI, and that's an OBGYN that has special training in fertility, just to see if they will recommend that you proceed with in vitro fertilization, which is where your eggs would be harvested and then the sperm from your partner or from your donor would be harvested, and then the embryo would be made outside of the body and placed into the uterus. So this is a way to avoid having to have the tubes intact in order for you to get pregnant. So that is what I recommend to my patients, but there are some folks who will attempt what's called a tubal reanastomosis, or basically freshening up the edges of the tube and putting it back together to see if it'll work. The only downfall from this is A, you gotta pay out of pocket for it, and B, it might not work. So for me, in my medical judgment, I recommend just going straight for in vitro fertilization, so that you have the best chances of being successful and you get more bang for your buck. Unfortunately, in our country, in the US, fertility is not really a big deal for a lot of our insurance companies, and so many insurance companies do not pay to help you get pregnant if you have trouble getting pregnant or if you've had a tubal ligation procedure. So hopefully reproductive justice is on the way, and we will make fertility something that is accessible to everyone regardless of their ability to pay. Last thing I want to talk to y'all about today is one of my biggest soapbox issues. So just excuse me while I go on a little rant. So informed consent. Informed consent meaning you have been informed about the risks and the benefits and the alternatives, and you have said that yes, I want to proceed with this. Please make sure that you are getting a full consultation prior to doing any type of surgery or any sort of procedure on your body. You need to ask, what are the risks of this procedure? What benefits can I expect to receive? Are there any other things that I should consider prior to going forward with this? And that's what informed consent actually means. We know that there were many women whose fertility was in essence stolen from them, especially back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, where tubal ligations were performed on poor women because doctors thought they couldn't afford to have more children. That is just a horrific thing to do to someone. For folks who were mentally challenged, they often also had their fertility taken away. And so this is a procedure that should only be done under your express written consent. So no one should be pressuring you to have a tubal ligation or to have any sort of tubal surgery. No one should be forcing you. This needs to be a decision that you make on your own. And if you're not absolutely sure that you are done with your childbearing, then I would opt for what we're going to start talking about next week, which is long-acting reversible contraception. All right, girl gang, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it helpful. Drop your questions and comments below. And if you found this video was useful to you, give your girl a thumbs up and share it with someone who could use it. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss a single Well Woman Wednesday episode. I'll catch you next time, girls. Peace.